Welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving deep into something most people avoid talking about. Something real, raw, and painful. This isn't just another gossip story or a flashy headline. This is the kind of truth that lingers in silence, hidden beneath the smiles and perfect images we see online and in the media. It's the kind of truth that makes you stop and think. And maybe, just maybe, it changes the way you look at everything. In a world driven by curated perfection, where celebrities post picture-perfect moments and influencers sell dreams that aren't always real, we're asking, what's behind the curtain? What happens when everything falls apart? When fame becomes a cage, when the world watches your every mistake? This 5-part deep dive pulls no punches, but it also doesn't spread hate. We're sticking to facts, feelings, and the hidden realities that often go ignored. No hate speech, no wild accusations. Just truth, compassion, and a journey through one of the most heartbreaking stories we've encountered. So buckle up, because what you're about to hear isn't easy, but it's necessary. This is the heartbreaking truth. For years, Lively and Ryan Reynolds were considered Hollywood's golden couple. A duo that represented not just glamour but genuine affection, wit, and relatability. They weren't just celebrities, they were a brand of love, laughter, and loyalty. From red carpet walks to cheeky birthday posts and heartwarming family moments, their relationship was framed as the kind of real-life fairy tale that audiences wanted so desperately to believe in. But behind every filtered image, perfectly timed joke, and headline-worthy appearance, there lies a deeper, more sobering question. What's the cost of creating and maintaining an illusion of perfection? As fans, we often forget that the people we admire are not characters in a rom-com. They're real individuals with flaws, struggles, and private battles we never see. The pressure to maintain an image, especially one that's been monetized and sold to the world as flawless, can be suffocating. In Blake and Ryan's case, that image has not only fueled their careers, but also become a standard they're expected to meet at every turn. The more beloved they became, the more tightly their lives were scrutinized. And while they navigated it all with seemingly effortless charm, the cracks began to appear to those paying close attention. In recent years, subtle signs have hinted that something may be amiss. Their once frequent and playful exchanges online have slowed. Their public appearances, once marked by warmth and chemistry, have taken on a more distant, polished tone. Body language experts and fans alike have noticed that their interactions seem more posed, more careful. The spark that once felt spontaneous now feels strategic. None of this is a confirmation of trouble, but it does beg the question: what happens to a couple when their relationship becomes part of their brand behind the scenes? Both are known to be highly disciplined and deeply involved in their careers. Ryan is no longer just the wisecracking actor we met in Deadpool. He's a businessman, an entrepreneur, and a producer. Blake, too, has evolved far beyond her gossip girl roots, entering the world of fashion, lifestyle, branding, and directing. Together, they've created an empire, but empires come with pressure. And that pressure doesn't just affect their professional choices. It seeps into the home, into the quiet moments, into the spaces where a couple should feel safest. Raising children under public scrutiny adds another layer of complexity. Blake and Ryan have always been fiercely protective of their kids, rarely sharing images or information. On the surface, this looks like a healthy boundary, and in many ways it is. But it also raises a poignant issue when a couple feels the need to retreat so drastically from public engagement. It often reflects deeper concerns. Privacy isn't just about shielding children, sometimes it's about preserving what little emotional sanctuary remains. What's particularly heartbreaking is how the public interprets these shifts. When Blake steps back from acting, the narrative becomes she's supporting her family or she's struggling behind the scenes. When Ryan says he's taking a break to focus on parenting, it's interpreted as either noble or evasive, depending on who's telling the story. In truth, these may simply be human choices, decisions made by two people trying to survive the incredible pressure that comes from living in the public eye for over a decade. But when every move is dissected, speculated upon, and judged, even the most grounded individuals can begin to lose their balance. Whispers have begun to circulate about legal restructuring behind the scenes. In early 2024, it was reported that the couple may have consulted legal advisors, not to file for divorce, but to untangle certain aspects of their shared business ventures. To some, this was dismissed as standard practice, but to others it was a signal, a silent shift that pointed toward a more serious change. After all, when your marriage is so closely linked to your professional identity, any legal adjustment becomes more than just paperwork. It becomes a statement, even if no one publicly admits it. The media, of course, has a field day with this kind of ambiguity. The same outlets that once celebrated Blake and Ryan as the internet's favorite couple are now publishing speculative headlines suggesting marital tension or emotional distance. Some articles cite anonymous sources who claim the couple is living separate lives, while others analyze paparazzi photos for signs of strain. It's a cruel cycle. When celebrities smile, the media calls it fake. When they look tired, it's labeled a crisis. And when they go silent, the speculation only grows louder. But perhaps the most painful truth of all is the emotional toll that this public narrative can take. For any couple, maintaining a relationship is difficult. For a couple like Blake and Ryan, who must also manage the expectations of millions, it's a tightrope walk. Every disagreement risks becoming a headline. Every absence invites rumors. Every attempt at privacy is questioned as suspicious. It's exhausting, dehumanizing, and in many ways isolating. And in that isolation, even the strongest bonds can begin to fray. Still, they've tried. Through it all, Blake and Ryan have done their best to maintain grace and dignity. They continue to attend select events, post the occasional light-hearted update, and protect their children with a level of care that deserves respect. But when you compare the early years of their relationship, full of unfiltered laughter and public affection, to the present day, there's an undeniable difference. It's not necessarily tragic, but it is telling. There's a quiet sadness in realizing that the people we admired for their love story may be struggling behind the scenes. It doesn't make them failures, it makes them human, and perhaps that's the real truth here, the one no one wants to say out loud. Behind every fairy tale, there's effort. Behind every Instagram perfect photo, there's a moment you didn't see. Behind every joke, a layer of vulnerability that doesn't make it to the caption. The heartbreaking truth is not that Blake and Ryan are flawed. It's that we expected them not to be. We held them up as the ideal, forgetting that real people can never truly live up to that. We wanted their love to be perfect so we could believe in something simple in a world that's anything but love is never simple. It's messy, painful, beautiful, and real, and sometimes the bravest thing a couple can do is simply keep going even when no one sees the struggle. So what's happening behind closed doors, we may never fully know. Maybe they're working through a difficult season. Maybe they're redefining what love looks like after a decade together. Or maybe they're choosing to end a chapter in the quietest, most respectful way possible. Whatever the case, the truth isn't ours to own, it's theirs. What we can do, however, is change the way we consume stories like these. Instead of waiting for the next scandal or split, we can choose empathy. Instead of demanding answers, we can allow space. Because sometimes the most heartbreaking truth is simply that people grow, change, and struggle, even those who seem to have it all. In the world of entertainment, where everything is curated for appeal, where smiles are rehearsed, poses perfected, and narratives controlled, it's easy to forget that the people on our screens are living, breathing individuals with emotions as raw as ours. The heartbreak doesn't always happen in front of a camera. Often it plays out behind closed doors in rooms filled with silence, where even whispered words can carry the weight of the world. And when a couple like Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds becomes a fixture in our collective consciousness, their silence starts to echo. People begin to wonder, is everything as perfect as it seems? The emotional cost of living in the spotlight is rarely discussed in public. Fame brings fortune and influence, yes, but it also creates invisible cages. Every interaction is analyzed. Every shift in tone, every change in body language becomes a potential headline. And when your relationship is treated like a public property, the pressure to constantly appear happy is not just exhausting, it's soul-wearing. Blake and Ryan may never publicly speak about the full weight of that burden, but their increasingly private behavior speaks volumes. There was a time when their love seemed refreshingly transparent. From witty birthday posts to award show shout-outs, the public felt invited into their world, but slowly those moments began to fade. Fans who once celebrated every playful exchange began noticing the quiet stretches, months without joint appearances, fewer photos, less public affection. And while silence doesn't always mean struggle, in a world so built on visibility, withdrawal often suggests discomfort. Imagine trying to navigate conflict in your relationship while millions of strangers are speculating about your marriage. Imagine trying to heal personal wounds while your name trends online because of an outfit, a missed event, or an untagged photo. These aren't problems the average couple faces, but for Blake and Ryan, they are a daily reality. Every small change becomes a puzzle the public is desperate to solve, even if the pieces are deeply personal. That relentless attention can lead to emotional distancing, not just from the world but from each other. The desire to retreat and preserve what's left of privacy can sometimes result in emotional walls between partners. After all, if the world constantly demands a version of you that's always composed and coordinated, where does the space exist to be vulnerable, to cry, to break, to heal? The nature of their careers only adds to the pressure. Both Blake and Ryan have spoken in interviews about the difficulty of balancing work and family. When one is filming across the country, the other may be managing the household. the children the emotional labor, and while they've spoken proudly about taking turns to support each other's careers, the reality is that this kind of juggling act, even with wealth and resources, is deeply taxing. The mental strain of keeping it all together, of being a present parent and a loving spouse, while also building empires, can easily chip away at even the strongest foundation. Moreover, fame doesn't pause for grief, exhaustion, or even marital strain. The public expects consistency: appear at the event, smile for the camera, post the photo, support the brand. But what happens when that expectation becomes unsustainable? What happens when one or both partners simply don't have the emotional bandwidth to perform anymore? For most couples, this is a signal to step back, reflect, and possibly seek help. For celebrity couples, it's a trigger for speculation, gossip, and sometimes even backlash. That's the heartbreaking paradox. When celebrities struggle privately, their silence is seen as suspicious. But if they speak out, they're accused of oversharing or trying to control the narrative. It's a no-win situation. So many choose to say nothing at all. Blake, who once frequently shared behind-the-scenes glimpses of her life, be it fashion, baking, or family fun, has become increasingly selective. Her social media presence, once bright and open, now feels more distant, controlled, and minimal. Meanwhile, Ryan, known for his self-deprecating humor and openness, has also shown signs of emotional withdrawal, offering less insight into his personal life and more focus on his business ventures. This shift in tone is subtle but unmistakable. Of course, some might argue that this is maturity, that after over a decade in the limelight, they're simply choosing boundaries, and that's valid. But boundaries often emerge from necessity, not luxury. When people retreat from visibility, it's rarely because everything is going perfectly. More often, it's a shield, an effort to find breathing room amidst the noise. Then there's the emotional toll of raising children in that environment. As much as they've tried to shield their kids, Blake and Ryan are still to people raising a family under a microscope. Parenting is already hard, but doing it while every decision, from school choices to birthday parties, is potentially subject to public opinion, that's an entirely different level of stress. And parents under stress often find themselves in conflict, not because they don't love each other, but because the external pressure intensifies every minor disagreement. There's also the loneliness of fame. It sounds strange, how could two of the most famous people in the world feel isolated? But isolation doesn't always come from lack of attention. It comes from a lack of understanding. Few people truly comprehend the emotional exhaustion that comes with constant visibility. Friends can offer support, but unless they've lived through it, they may not fully grasp the complexity. And when your partner is the only person who can relate to that experience, it creates a dependency that's both beautiful and incredibly fragile. As the months have gone by, reports have surfaced, quiet, respectful, but persistent, that suggest Blake and Ryan are going through a private transition. Whether that means emotional distancing, legal restructuring, or simply a decision to reevaluate their public presence, no one outside their circle knows for sure. But it's clear something has shifted. The performances are fewer, the smiles feel more reserved, the distance, though never confirmed, is felt, and yet they continue. They show up for work. They appear at select events. They smile for the cameras when needed. They protect their children fiercely. All of this points to a couple that, despite any struggle, is still trying, still choosing discretion over drama, still clinging to whatever pieces they can hold onto. And that in itself is heartbreaking, because sometimes trying quietly is the hardest kind of heartbreak. What we often miss in these narratives is that real love isn't always loud. Sometimes it's found in silence, in the decision not to comment, in the effort to preserve dignity in the face of chaos. Blake and Ryan may be going through one of the most complex chapters of their lives, or they may be simply redefining what love and partnership look like in their world. But either way, they are navigating it with more grace than most of us could manage. Under that level of scrutiny, the real tragedy isn't that they might be struggling. It's that the world often refuses to give people like them the space to struggle at all. We want vulnerability, but we punish imperfection. We demand truth, but we reject complexity. And in doing so, we dehumanize the very people we claim to admire. As we move forward in this story, let's not focus on whether Blake and Ryan are still together or falling apart. Let's instead recognize what their silence represents, the emotional cost of being perfect in a world that never stops watching. And perhaps the most heartbreaking truth of all is that even in love, even in family, even in success, there can be profound loneliness, a kind that no amount of applause can fix. No matter how strong a relationship seems from the outside, every couple has a breaking point. It might come quietly, without a fight, through months of emotional distance, or it might explode in a moment of raw confrontation. But when two people have been carrying the weight of public expectations, private responsibilities, and constant scrutiny, the stress accumulates in invisible layers. In the case of Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds, what once looked effortless may now feel like survival. And that's where the heartbreaking truth becomes undeniable. Even the most picture-perfect love can start to fracture under relentless pressure. For years, Blake and Ryan were the standard of love story that seemed untouched by the chaos of celebrity culture. But even the strongest love can fade when life becomes a stage, and every interaction is judged through a lens of perfection. There's something uniquely damaging about having to perform happiness while possibly feeling heartbreak just beneath the surface. And for two people so often praised for their charm and humor, the pressure to maintain that illusion must have been overwhelming. There are signs that things may have reached a point where the emotional cost became too high. It's not about a single moment or event, but rather the slow erosion of connection, something that often happens when work, parenthood, and public life leave little space for actual intimacy. When two people are constantly moving, managing, appearing, and pleasing, the relationship starts to take a back seat. And sometimes by the time you realize what's happened, the gap is already too wide. The silence between Blake and Ryan in recent months is louder than any words. The pauses between public appearances, the decrease in online interactions, the careful avoidance of certain topics in interviews, all of it feels like the quiet that comes just before or just after something breaks. It's not malicious or dramatic. It's not fueled by scandal or betrayal. It's just two people possibly exhausted, quietly stepping away from something that once brought them joy. The hardest part of reaching a breaking point isn't the ending, it's the recognition that something precious has changed. And for a couple like Blake and Ryan, who have built careers and identities around their unity, that realization can be devastating. When your love has been turned into a symbol, deciding to walk away from it or even just pause, it feels like letting down an entire world that wanted to believe in you. But staying together for appearances only leads to more pain in the long run. The decision to step back, if that's what's happening, may not be a failure. It may be the first act of real honesty in a long time. People often ask why celebrities don't just take a break or go to therapy, as if love can be neatly repaired in a few sessions or with a vacation away from the cameras. But healing, especially in the spotlight, is complicated when both partners are constantly working, traveling, or managing enormous public brands. Scheduling time to reconnect isn't as easy as it sounds. Even private moments become performance adjacent because somewhere someone is always watching. That surveillance doesn't stop at paparazzi. It extends to agents, managers, sponsors, fans, and media outlets that profit from every whisper of trouble. And then there's the guilt of possibly letting go, of admitting that you're no longer aligned, of facing the judgment that inevitably comes when a high-profile relationship falters. For Blake and Ryan, who've always valued integrity and privacy, the emotional toll of even contemplating separation would be immense. The public might see it as another Hollywood split, but for them it's a personal loss, a death of a chapter that defined much of their lives. There's also the fear of what happens next. In a relationship so publicly entwined, moving forward means untangling not just finances or schedules, but narratives, memories, and a shared public identity. It means redefining who they are individually after years of being known as one of the industry's most beloved couples. That loss of identity can be disorienting even for the strongest people. And when children are involved, every decision becomes 10 times harder. How do you explain change to the world when you're still figuring it out yourself? Some insiders suggest that Blake and Ryan are not rushing anything, that they're still in contact, that they're navigating this quietly, respectfully, and with the kids' well-being at the center. And that's perhaps the most human part of their story. They're not putting on a dramatic breakup show. They're not airing grievances. They're simply stepping back, possibly to reassess, to breathe, to survive. And in a culture that thrives on chaos, their quietness is a kind of rebellion, one rooted in care, not bitterness. Still, the signs are hard to ignore. Events they used to attend together are now solo appearances. Social media posts are more guarded. Even the tone of their press interviews has shifted from lighthearted and teasing to vague, diplomatic, and often deflective. These may seem like minor changes, but for those who have followed their journey for over a decade, it feels like watching the sunset on something once bright and warm. And while it's tempting to try to find a villain in these situations, the reality is often more complex. No one is necessarily at fault. Love doesn't always end with betrayal or drama. Sometimes it just fades. Sometimes it buckles under years of compounded pressure. Sometimes people just grow apart quietly, painfully, and without anyone to blame. But make no mistake, the pain is real. It's there in the silence, in the careful distance, in the way neither of them is saying much at all. That silence is the space where heartbreak lives, where the words can't yet be spoken because they're still too heavy, too fresh. And while the rest of the world speculates and gossips, the people at the center are left to navigate the wreckage alone, or at best together in confusion. What's particularly tragic is that we, the public, often create the very conditions that make love so hard to preserve. We turn relationships into entertainment. We analyze their smallest gestures. We speculate endlessly about their private moments. And in doing so, we sometimes contribute to the unraveling. Blake and Ryan are not the first couple to reach a breaking point. And they won't be the last, but their story is a stark reminder of how fragile even the strongest love can be when it's forced to perform non-stop. Still, there is dignity in how they've handled it. No Twitter fights, no leaked statements, no messy fallout, just space, distance, and silence. That kind of restraint takes strength. It shows a deep respect for the history they share, even if that history is coming to an end, or at the very least evolving into something else. The heartbreaking truth here is not simply that they may be parting ways, it's that they gave the world something to believe in, and now they must figure out how to protect themselves from that belief. They built a love story that inspired millions, and now they are quietly dismantling it, perhaps not forever, but certainly in a way that feels different than before. If there's one lesson to take from all this, it's that real love isn't always about staying together forever. Sometimes it's about knowing when to let go, when to choose healing over appearances, when to honor the past without forcing the future. And if that's what Blake and Ryan are doing, then perhaps this isn't the end of their love story, but simply a transformation of it into something more honest, more human, and ultimately more healing. In the end, what we've witnessed isn't just the unraveling of a celebrity love story, it's a mirror held up to our culture. We looked at Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds and saw something beautiful, something hopeful, something that felt untouched by the chaos we've come to expect from Hollywood. For over a decade, they gave us a reason to believe in lasting love even in the spotlight. But maybe the real heartbreak here isn't just in what they might be going through privately. Maybe it's in how desperately we needed their image to be real. We as a society have grown too comfortable with consuming people's lives as content. We scroll, we judge, we speculate, all while forgetting that behind the carefully cropped photos and rehearsed interviews are real people with real emotions. It's easy to romanticize the idea of love when it's dressed in couture and lit by paparazzi flashes. But true love, the kind that survives decades and disappointment, rarely looks perfect. It's complicated, exhausting, and messy, and sometimes it breaks. If Blake and Ryan are going through a private reckoning, they deserve compassion, not commentary. They've given the public more than enough. From humor to humility, they brought something genuine into a world saturated with superficiality. If they're choosing to protect their peace, redefine their relationship, or even part ways with grace, then that too is a form of love, and that deserves respect. Let this story serve as a reminder. Behind every smiling celebrity couple is a story you'll never fully know, not because they're hiding, but because they're healing. And healing should never have to happen under a microscope. The heartbreaking truth is that no matter how much we admire someone, we are not entitled to their pain. We're not owed the full story. And when people, even famous ones, go quiet, it doesn't always mean scandal. Sometimes it just means they're trying to survive. As fans, we should learn to hold space for that. Instead of demanding details, we can offer silence. Instead of clinging to illusions, we can accept the truth even when it hurts. Because love in its truest form is never about perfection. It's about growth, and sometimes it's about letting go. Whatever happens next for Blake and Ryan, we wish them peace, privacy, and healing. And we hope their story, no matter how it ends, reminds us all that the most beautiful truths are often the ones that hurt the most.